Hey, what's up? What's going on? Welcome back to another episode of English with Dane, a podcast designed to make you feel good about your English. As always, I'm your host, Dane, and you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at English with Dane. Before I say anything else, this episode will exist in audio format only because I'm taking time to read through all of your feedback from the first video episode, and it has given me a lot to think about. So I'm taking a bit of time to tweak a few things and really mold it into something that is closer to what I think we all want this podcast to be. So next week's episode will be back to video format, and a sincere thank you to all of you who have written to me with your feedback and words of encouragement. By the way, to tweak, spelled T-W-E-A-K, tweak, in this context means to make small changes to something, in case you didn't catch that. Okay, today's episode is all about understanding how our brains trick us, como nos engañan, how our brains trick us. We're going to talk about biases and fallacies, sesgos o prejuicios y falacias. This is a subject that has always been of interest to me, and I think it's super important to know about these things. It's incredibly useful to understand the shortcuts, los atajos, the shortcuts that our brains take to make sense of the world without us realizing it, because it gives us a chance to operate better and to make better decisions overall. Recuerda que you make decisions, you don't take decisions. Maybe you know all about biases and fallacies already, in which case, great. Now you get to hear about them in English. If you haven't heard of biases and fallacies before, you're in for a treat. Estás de suerte. You're in for a treat. So let's become better thinkers overall. Also, real quick, I want to do more episodes like this where the English language isn't necessarily at the center of everything, and instead, I talk about things that are interesting to me or that I'm learning about. My reasoning for this is that there are only a certain amount of English-related topics to cover, and while those are infinite, I don't want this podcast to feel stale or stagnant. And after all, or at the end of the day, al fin y al cabo, at the end of the day, language learning happens outside in the real world. So let's talk about real world stuff. Okay, longest intro ever. Let's get into it. You are listening to episode 24 of season 2 of English with Dane. Hit it. Before we talk about these biases and fallacies that are active in our brains behind the scenes, let's define what biases and fallacies are. A bias, spelled B-I-A-S, is basically your brain leaning one way without you even realizing it, sin que te des cuenta, without you even realizing it. So the mechanisms behind these preferences, tendencies, or inclinations towards something, hacia algo, without us being aware. Let's look at an example. Maybe the most common bias we deal with in our day-to-day is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when your brain looks for evidence that proves what you already believe and ignores the evidence that proves you wrong, que demuestra que te equivocas, that proves you wrong. It's your mind acting like your personal yes man, but being a very dishonest one. A yes man is someone who agrees with whoever is in charge, maybe a boss, a leader of sorts, a friend, someone who just says yes to anything. ChatGPT is a yes man, for example, because it always starts with, yeah, that's a great idea. You're really onto something. And it could just be the most average bullshit ever. So confirmation bias is present all the time, especially in things like politics. If you already think a politician is corrupt, every story that criticizes them will feel like proof. But when a positive story comes out, you might just scroll right past it or not care or even think it's fake. It is sometimes so strong, this bias, that you will forgo or disregard the credibility of a well-established news source to confirm the narrative you already have accepted as valid or true. That is an example of a bias. Now let's look at what a fallacy is. Fallacy is spelled F-A-L-L-A-C-Y, by the way. A fallacy is basically a mistake in reasoning, un error de razonamiento, a mistake in reasoning, a trick that our brain or someone else uses that makes us believe something without real evidence. An example of a fallacy would be the straw man fallacy. Straw man as in hombre de paja, straw man. This fallacy is one of the most annoying tricks that people use in arguments. The straw man fallacy is when someone takes your real argument, twists it into something weaker, más débil, weaker, or more extreme, and then attacks that version instead of what you actually said. They change your argument, and then they attack that changed argument. It looks like this. You say, we should all eat more vegetables. And I say, so you want us to stop eating meat forever? That's the straw man fallacy. I build a straw man out of your argument, so a flimsy version of your argument, one that is not solid, one that is unconvincing, and I attack that instead. Flimsy is a great word, by the way. F-L-I-M-S-Y. Flimsy, not solid, fragile. Rickety is another good word that means the same thing. Endeble, I think, is the best translation into Spanish. So yeah, that's an example of a fallacy or a mistake in reasoning. So now that we know what biases and fallacies are, let's take a look at the most common ones that we deal with most often without being aware. We started talking about confirmation bias, when we ignore information that proves us wrong and pay attention to the one that confirms our narrative of the world. This actually affects you when it comes to your English. I know we weren't going to make English the center of this episode, but this one just fits perfectly. If you say to yourself, my English is terrible, anytime you make a minor mistake, you'll think to yourself, see, I knew it. Lo sabía, I knew it. And if you have a good conversation with someone, you'll think to yourself, nah, that was just luck. Confirmation bias keeps you stuck. You will filter out the wins, las victorias, the wins, and you'll dwell on your mistakes. To dwell on something, spelled D-W-E-L-L, means to spend too much time thinking about something, usually something negative, when it's not useful anymore. Maybe you keep replaying a negative moment in your head and you just kind of torture yourself about it. So that's how confirmation bias can affect your English and your confidence, really. Flip this narrative on its head. Stop thinking to yourself that your English is terrible. Even if it objectively is, who cares? Flip the narrative. When you catch yourself thinking, I make so many mistakes, or I can't keep a conversation going, I'm not ready to interact with people confidently, or any of that negative self-talk, just play devil's advocate. Just defend yourself against that narrative. Think something like, it's actually not that bad for how little I use it. Or maybe I'm a bit out of practice, but I could definitely be okay in a lot of situations. The more you catch your confirmation bias acting up, dando la lata, acting up, the stronger that other narrative becomes in your head. I think negative self-talk is something a lot of us struggle with, and we're often really hard on ourselves. I always think, what would I say to a friend or a loved one if they spoke negatively about themselves? Why shouldn't I also say that to myself when that self-criticism takes over? I don't know. Food for thought. Let's look at another common bias that affects us. Anchoring or anchoring bias. An anchor, spelled A-N-C-H-O-R, is un ancla. An anchoring bias is when the first number or piece of information you see, que ves, sticks in your head and it conditions everything that comes after. Your brain grabs onto the first thing, like an anchor, and refuses to let go. It happens when we go shopping and we see a jacket that we like, we look at the price, and we see 200, But then we see that it's on sale for 80 and we think, oh, what a bargain, vaya chollo, what a bargain. The real value is 80, but our brain held on, se aferró, our brain held on to that first 200 and we fell for it yet again. Y volvimos a caer, and we fell for it yet again. Similarly, if restaurants add a 90 euro bottle of wine to their menu, suddenly the 40 euro one seems much more reasonable. And with the cheapest too. The second cheapest feels better once you've seen the cheapest at the bottom. Those second most expensive and second cheapest bottles of wine are usually the ones with the most markup, the ones where the restaurant is making more money. So they take advantage of that bias. Another scenario where anchoring takes place, maybe you're in a salary negotiation and they say the average salary for this position is 30K. And that number anchors to the brain when you were actually aiming for something higher, and maybe you get a bit thrown in the negotiation. To get thrown means to get a bit confused or caught off guard, como que te pillan desprevenido. Thrown as in lanzado, arrojado, not as in thrown como trono. Okay, it has a W. You get a bit thrown and you kind of lose that battle and maybe end up settling for less. Socially, this happens too. If someone says, my friend is coming over, he's really smart, that label becomes your anchor, your reference for that person. Now you'll maybe think the things they say are smarter, or perhaps you'll try to disprove the notion that this person is really smart in your head all the time. So that's anchoring bias. Let's go through a few more in a quicker way so we can get to the fallacies, because those are really interesting. Spotlight bias is a huge one for people, and I include myself. The spotlight being that big light that shines on one specific person or area on stage. Spotlight bias is thinking everyone is watching you, noticing your mistakes, or judging you more than they actually are. You feel like you are under a giant spotlight, but in reality, people are too focused on themselves to notice. Like when you spill a bit of coffee on yourself at work, and now you think everyone is noticing the stain, la mancha, the stain on the side of your shirt. Or when you're speaking English and you slightly mispronounce a word, and you think everyone noticed and everyone is laughing inside, when in reality, most people didn't notice, and if they did, they didn't care or already moved on. Maybe you're speaking in public at work, or giving a presentation at an event, and you stumble for a second, como que te trabas, you stumble for a second. Maybe you panic a bit and you feel judged, when in reality, maybe people are just thinking about lunch or aren't even paying attention. When you post on social media, you think people are judging everything about you every time they see your story or your post or whatever. A great way to fight this feeling is to say to yourself, people aren't watching me, they're watching themselves. This last one is called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it works like this. Beginners often overestimate how much they know, and experts often feel they know less than they do. Like your friend who watched a YouTube video about investing believes he or she knows all about the markets and funds and has all these crazy strategies, versus the expert who you actually want to hear from just says things like, stick to the basics and remember it's a long-term thing. Or someone who watches a few videos and listens to a few podcasts about nutrition, and now they're lecturing you on carbs or fasting or vitamins, while an actual nutrition expert would say something like, well, it's complicated and everyone is different. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. Be aware of it. It's named after two psychologists from Cornell University, shout out to Andy Bernard, who worked on this study and wrote a bunch about it. Okay, let's look at a few fallacies now, que son como los primos de los biases, and how these are actively playing a role in how we interact with people and the world. We looked at the straw man fallacy earlier, where people distort your argument to something more extreme or flimsy, and then attack that version. Let's now take a look at the ad hominem fallacy. This one means attacking the person instead of their argument. It's like saying, you're dumb, so your idea must be dumb too. So maybe you have a valid opinion on climate change, a research-backed opinion or view, and someone says, well, you're not a climate scientist, so your opinion doesn't matter. That would be an example of the ad hominem fallacy. I'm sure you can find examples of the ad hominem fallacy watching how the highest ranks of the White House deal with the press, for example. The issue with this error in thinking, of course, is that arguments are meant to be judged, ser juzgados, are meant to be judged on their own, not according to the person who delivers them, even if they are flawed. Arguments should hold water, as we say. One fallacy that I think is really interesting is the sunk cost fallacy. Sunk como hundido, sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is when you keep investing time, money, or energy into something just because you've already invested that time, money, or energy, even when it makes no sense to continue. A great example of this is walking out of a movie when you go to the movies. You paid money for the ticket, money to park maybe, and you got some popcorn. And 15 minutes into the movie, you think, this movie is terrible, I don't want to watch this. Then the sunk cost fallacy kicks in. But I paid to watch it, I paid for parking and popcorn, I'm here, I might as well stay and watch the movie. It seems reasonable. But now not only have you wasted your money, you're going to waste your time too. In reality, you should just get up and leave. Maybe someone is in a relationship they don't actually like, but they keep going because, well, I've already put 4 years into this, so I guess I'll keep it going. Maybe you're watching a TV show or series that got boring a few episodes ago, and there's only 10 episodes, so you might as well watch 5 more and a ver cómo termina. Or maybe you just don't waste your time and your energy and you do something else. That's the sunk cost fallacy. Oh, eating a huge meal, una comida enorme, eating a huge meal at a restaurant to the point you're so full you feel terrible because you already paid for it. Or going to a fast food place and getting 10 nuggets for $5.50 because 6 nuggets cost 4, so it makes sense. But you only really wanted to eat 6 nuggets and now you feel like shit and you spent $1.50 more. Okay, you get it, the sunk cost fallacy. The labor lump fallacy is an interesting one too, the labor lump fallacy. Lump as in una cantidad and labor as in trabajo. The labor lump fallacy. It's the mistaken belief that there's only a fixed amount of work to go around. Like one pie, una tarta, a pie with a limited number of slices, de trozos, slices. If one person gets a job, it must mean someone else loses theirs. But the truth is, the economy doesn't work like a fixed pie. Work and jobs can actually grow, and new jobs and new fields are created all the time. You might have a job that didn't exist 10 years ago. And your kids might have a job that doesn't exist now. This is a fallacy that is greatly exploited when it comes to the rhetoric of immigration, for example, in the news and the media. The argument is that immigrants will take all the jobs and soon there won't be jobs left for the locals. The reality is that immigration creates demand, right? They rent homes, they eat food, they start businesses, which adds to overall growth. The analogy is often made is this one. If one person lights a candle, there's less light for everyone else. That's not how it works. More candles means more light. And in the same way, more people working often means more growth, not less. That's the labor lump fallacy. The last one I wanted to talk about is the bandwagon fallacy. The bandwagon, todo junto, or to jump on the bandwagon, means to join something just because it's popular, not because you really believe in it. So thinking, well, if tons of people are doing this, it must be good. If everyone is investing in crypto, it must be safe. If all of my friends are cheating on their partners, it's okay that I do it too. It makes sense. When behavior gets normalized, it becomes more easily accepted. We all remember the NFT bandwagon from a few years ago. Maybe Beanie Babies in the US in the 90s, that was a huge bandwagon. Pokemon Go, the Ice Bucket Challenge, the avocado toast obsession of the 2010s. Bandwagons are everywhere. Remember the bandwagon fallacy next time you feel the need to participate in something just because everyone else is doing it. Okay, that was a long one. I hope I didn't lose too many of you. I was just thinking about these biases and fallacies the other day, and it just felt like something that was maybe important to talk about with things being the way they are in the world, and there being this feeling of division out there, or let's be real, on social media. So let me know if you enjoyed this episode, and if you want me to do more episodes like this, where we just kind of talk about something while working on English, almost as a side effect of just talking. Share the show with someone you think would enjoy it. Let's keep this ball rolling. And for those of you who are just starting to listen to the show, I really appreciate you being along for the ride. And for those of you who have been listening for a while, thank you for listening. This show would be nothing without you. Follow English with Dane on Instagram and TikTok. Send me messages. Reach out. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. All right. Have a good week. Later.